Hey, Pastor Steve Waldron. I hope you're having an incredible day or night in Jesus. We're on michelleblake.com, and got a wonderful list here, she does, about the King James Version of the Bible. So I want to read some more on this. So thanks for being here, and God bless you. Let's look. So George Bernard Shaw, this Fabian socialist playwright, says this: the translation, now known as the King James Bible, is extraordinarily well done because to the translators, what they were translating was not merely a curious collection of ancient books written by different authors in different stages of culture, but the Word of God divinely revealed through His chosen, expressly inspired scribes. In this conviction, they carried out their work with boundless reverence and care, achieved a beautifully artistic result. They made a translation so magnificent, to this day the common human Britisher or citizen of the United States of North America accepts and worshipped it as a single book by a single author, the book being the book of books and the author being God. God's secretary, the writer Adam Nicholson, said this: secretaryship is one of the great shaping forces behind the King James Bible. There's no authorship involved here. Authorship is egotistical, an assumption that thou might have something new worth saying you don't. Every iota of the Bible counts, but without it, you count for nothing. The secretary knows that. Like Robert Cecil, he can be clever, canny, resourceful, and energetic, but for all the frustrations, he does not distort the source of his authority. A secretary, whether of God or a king, is in a position of dependent power. He has no authority independent of his master, but he executes that authority without hesitation or compromise. He is nothing without his master, but everything through him. Loyalty is power and submission and control. For this reason, biblical translation is like royal service. It could only be utterly faithful. Without faithfulness, it became meaningless. God's secretaries, they weren't authors. James' son in the New Athenians, I probably did a review on this years ago. I believe that the authorized version, known as the King James Bible, is the inspired, infallible, inerrant, immutable, pure Word of God to English-speaking people. The UPC has Sunday school literature, says much the same thing. Alistair McGrath, once again, I quoted him last time, a historian, great theologian. The KJV did not follow literary trends, it established them. The two greatest influences on the shaping of the English language are the works of William Shakespeare and the English translation of the Bible that appeared in 1611. The King James Bible, named for the King of England who ordered the production of a fresh translation in 1604, is both a religious and a literary classic. Isaac said this: the authorized version is a miracle and a landmark. Its felicities are manifold. Its music has entered into the blood and marrow of every English thought and speech. It has given countless provers and proverbial phrasers, even to the unlearned and the irreligious. There's no corner of English life, no conversation ribald or reverent that is not adorned. Jonathan Swift of Gulliver's Travels said this: the translators of our Bible were masters of the English style, much fitter for that work than any which we see in the present writings, which I take to be owing to the simplicity that runs through the whole. Professor of English Literature at Yale University, William Phelps, says this: now, as the English-speaking people have the best Bible in the world, and as it is the most beautiful monument erected to the English alphabet, we ought to make the most of it, for it is incomparably rich inheritance, free to all who can read. This means we ought invariably in the church on public occasions use the authorized version. All others are inferior. That's Yale. Harvard says the same thing. H. Wheeler Robinson says this: the authorized version is a miracle and a landmark. There's no corner of English life, no conversation or bald reverence not adorned. Embedded in its tertiary wording is the language of a century earlier. It is both broadened and something that's a word I don't want to use here. Let's go back to Charlton Heston, about the King James Version. He says this: Shakespeare aside, there's no comparable writing in the language, as has been observed by men wiser than I. Over the past several centuries, it's been the single book in most households, an enormous force in shaping the development of the English language. Carried around the world by missionaries, it provided the base by which English is about to become the lingua franca of the world the next century. Albert Cook says this: the elevation and nobility of biblical diction, assisted by its slightly archaic tinge, have a tendency to keep all English style above meanness and triviality. John Strype, a historian from the 17th century into the 18th century, said this: it's wonderful to see with what joy this book of God was received, not only among the learned sort, but generally all over England, among all the vulgar, the common people, and with what greediness the word of God was read, and what resort to places where the reading of it was. Everybody that could bought the book or busily read it or got others to read it to them if they could not themselves. Divers more elderly people learned to read on purpose. Even little boys flocked among the rest to hear portions of the Holy Scriptures read. Isn't that incredible? On a historical scale, this is David Daniel, head of the Tyndale Society, the Bible in English, its history and influence. The sheer longevity of this version is a phenomenon without parallel. King James is still the best-selling book in the world. It's the story of the earth we live on. Its influence cannot be calculated. It's the best-selling book in all the world year after year. So we're going to stop there, but read the book of books, dictated by the King of Kings, Jesus. But God bless you. We'll talk with you later. Bye-bye.